Hello, my name's Duncan, and welcome to Back Away from the Donkey and Bath books. And this is part of my Make Me Love Arthur C. Clarke sort of series I'm doing. I said Arthur C. Clarke is one of these authors that I've always, through decades of reading, thought I should love, and I don't love. I don't mind him, but I don't love him. But I don't think I've read widely enough. So, gathering from genre books helped me with the first one, and we read Imperial Earth together, which was a quite interesting one to read. And I've just read a selection of short stories. Arthur C. Clarke, 1956 to 72. This was released by Sphere Books, and as a collection, it is really wonderful. I mean, the way it's put together, because at the front we've got a really good intro by Arthur C. Clarke himself, which actually is really, really good. And at the back, which all these sort of things should do, they've got a fantastic bibliography of all his books at the time. More of these collections should do that. You know, they really should do. You know, SF Masterworks, you could learn something off this. And this Sphere Science Fiction did some really good stuff around this time. And there's quite a few others in the collection. There's some Heinlein ones, Asimov ones. But the cover here is a Jim Burns cover. Jim Burns, one of my favourite science fiction artists and artists of book covers and stuff. And that book cover is in this book, Lightship. If you've never seen the book Lightship. And that is really good. I'm just trying to, you can see, hopefully see the image there. It's really, really good. If you can't see it well, I'll try and put it up on the screen separately. And I think that picture is taken from the idea for the story Hate, which is later on in the book. Jim Burns, my friend, is actually not friends with Jim Burns. He knows Jim Burns because he's done work for him and worked with him. And Jim Burns always read the books that he illustrated the covers for, unlike some other artists. It's because they are. Chris Foss, famously one of the artists at the time, if you've seen his wonderful spaceships, Chris Foss ones, but apparently they just said, oh, we want a cover for Asimov, and he just painted some random spaceship. Jim Burns was different. He used to read all the stories in the books before he'd paint the covers. And that's part of the reason why I get. And I also just love the style of them. But yes, so that's on the 956-72. There's an earlier one, which, weirdly, me talking about Chris Foss, has got a Chris Foss cover on it, which I might see if I can get of some of his earlier works. But what I quite liked about the idea of this is you're working chronologically through his stories. Like, it starts in the first... So you can hopefully see the development of his writing. So the stories in here are Venture to the Moon, which was 1956. 1960 was Into the Comet. And then you've got Summertime on Icarus, which is 1960. 1961, Death and the Senator. Another 1961, which is Hate. And then in 1965, we've got Sunjammer. And then 1972, we've got A Meeting with Medusa. So that's all the stories that's in that collection. So I'm going to speak about each story separately, and I'm going to tell you what I think of them, and if they've made me love Arthur C. Clarke yet. But I really quite enjoyed this collection, because it was just interesting going through how they progressed, and you could see some progression through them. Well, I think you could. So if you want to start with a short stories for Arthur C. Clarke, it's a good place to start as far as I'm concerned. So we will start on the first one. Yeah, the first story is called Venture to the Moon, and it's 1956 it was written, and it's basically the story of 3 different ships all going to the moon. Russian, British, and American, and it's told by the point of view from the British commander, telling the story, and like, this is how it happened. So initially, the spaceships go onto, there's a space station going around the Earth, and they're meant to launch from there. And what I found with this story is, it starts off that, and then they're going to head to the moon, and you initially get the feel of the competition between them, even though they're meant to all be going together. And I found it weird that they were all going on 3 separate ships, which was a bit strange. But there's this plan for the British people to go there first, and that is because of the way the acceleration works. They will rotate around the moon, the Earth, orbit the Earth a certain amount of times before they leave for the moon. And the British idea is to do a one less orbit. So basically they arrive at the moon early. So when they do this and they leave away, what happens is the Russians and the Americans had planned the same thing. And that's just one of the little things. There's a few little things when then they basically land onto the moon within sort of minutes of each other. So it's just sort of quite a bit of sort of more whimsy in this story than I was expecting to have. Clarke. You get a feeling that all the science is accurate, which you always do with Clarke, which it all probably is. I'm not a scientist myself. I know a bit of physics, but nothing drastic. I know more biology than I do physics. And what do I know more physics? No, I know a bit of radiation physics. That's another story. But yes, the way that works gives it a lot of bit of whimsy. You get all three teams onto the moon, and they are exploring the moon. And I'm not going to tell you the ending, but you have some tragedy on the moon. But then you also have the fact that the British decide to come back early, and this is all to do with something that I'm not going to reveal to you. But it's also that sense of whimsy in the whole story, and the whole feeling of the story that is not a bit of a joke. It's like trying to get one up on people. So yeah, so that's Venture to the Moon. So yes, so there was a bit of whimsy there, and it's one of the many stories Clarke wrote about the moon, because I think it was one of his favourite places. I know he was a big fan of the moon. Can you be a fan of a orbiting body? Who knows? Second story called Into the Comet, and it's a comet coming close to the Earth, and they send a spaceship to examine and do lots of scientific experiments, and they're trying to get really close to it. It's quite weird because one of the guys, the reasons he's allowed on was on there, it was because he was so light, because he was weighing 120 pounds, which I worked out is about 8 stone, which is probably about the weight of my left arm or something. But yeah, a ridiculously small guy. But as you go on, you realise there's a lot of people on this ship that they're chasing this comet with. But yeah, that's by the by. They chasing this comet, and what they want to do is obviously do lots of science there because there's a chance of this happen. And they do mention, quite interestingly, Halley's Comet in 1986, saying that would be the next chance to actually see something. And I remember seeing Halley's Comet when it came in 1986. So that's a little fun fact for you, and some of you older people may remember that as well. But yes, examine it. But what happens is they're examining it, they get right into the tail of the comet, and basically their computers go absolutely haywire, and it means that they cannot work out trajectories to get back to Earth, and they have to find a solution. And this is when we all go all analog. And find out ways of not relying purposely on technology. And that's what I think this is. It's almost a cautionary tale about over-reliance on technology. This one and the Venture to the Moon one, I feel that is very sort of typical of Clarke in the way that you don't really get deeply knowledgeable of the characters or feel much to them, which changes in some of the later stories. But it's an interesting little story, and I like the bit about the overuse of technology and how they solve the problem to get back to Earth. It's just a nice, it's a good, solid little story. Yes, the next story, Summertime on Icarus, another one from 1956, I think, or was it 1960? It's basically people examining the sun and getting close up, and this is about somebody, they crash on an asteroid, or this one guy crashes on this asteroid when he's meant to be sort of examining it because it's right close to the sun, and because of the way it's rotating, it will soon become sort of sun time, and he will die because he'll burn up because it'll be so hot. And it's about a lot of the thoughts that go through his head as he's thinking about dying and bits like this. But it didn't pull me in as the character. The character didn't feel well-rounded enough. It's an interesting little story. I've read similar stuff before, but it didn't really do huge amounts for me out of the stories in the collection. Next story, written in 1961, is called Death and the Senator, and it's probably my favourite one from this collection because it's the most human, it's the most relatable, and I think he's quite a nice random character. And it's about a senator called, I'm trying to remember his name now, Senator Stedman. They don't give me his first name, well, I couldn't remember his first name. And he discovers that he is basically dying of a heart condition that nobody can do anything about. and so he starts sort of visiting his family more and bits like this. And what's interesting about this story is apparently it was originally sort of inspired by a senator who in America who said out about what a waste of money space exploration was. So the story will follow Stedman, and he's finds out, and what he finds out is that there could be a solution to his heart problem, and he goes and gets assessed in Russia. And what happens is Russia have got the USSR have got a space station, and they have a technique in trial that could save him. So he goes back home and to think about all this, and we have all the not convolutions, all the thoughts about whether he should do it, because it's all testing and all test subject, and it's just a very, very human story. I'm not going to give away the ending. I think for me, it's one of Clarke's strongest ones for the people. What I did find interesting was this senator. One of his heroes is Cecil Rhodes, and Cecil Rhodes is quite a bipolar sort of figure in history of his what he did, which was in the aims of the British Empire not particularly good, but I understand why people down at that period would quote somebody like Cecil Rhodes. But yes, going back to the story, I think it's probably one of Clarke's most human ones of this collection. It feels good, and I know it's quite a popular story of his. What I did pick up to, and I did pick up in a lot of this, is I think that R.C. Clarke does not come across as a very British writer. This sounds weird. Somebody like Brian Aldiss, I think, does. But Clarke, because he seems to do a lot of American-centric stories, like, why did this have to be a senator? Why could it not have been a British politician? And a lot of the stuff seems to be American-centric. And that's why, to me, he doesn't always feel like a very British writer. Maybe that's part of the issue I have with him sometimes. Who knows? But anyway, Death of Senator. If you find it anywhere, read it. It's well worth reading. On to the next story. Next story is called Hate. And that was written in 1961 as well. And it is about Joey, who's a pearl fisher, just off of New Guinea, sort of north of Australia. He basically is originally from Budapest in Hungary, and he remembers the Russian tanks rolling in there, in where his brother died. Anyway, they are on this boat, and one night they hear a big splash. And then the next day people are down there, and they find an object down there. And this object is a space capsule, which ends up being a Soviet space capsule. And that is what this, I said, the picture, a Jim Burns picture, I think is meant to represent. So in the story, you can't actually see the face of the person in it. So maybe I've got the wrong story there. But yes, so he's a pearl fisher, and so it's about him planning to rescue this capsule, and some of his reasoning behind it. I don't want to give away some stuff. I really don't, because there's a really lovely little twist at the back end of it. And this is quite a human story as well, because you hear about his motivations and the loss of his brother and the Soviet invasion of Budapest, of Hungary. And it's just a nice... It wouldn't look out of place in the Twilight Zone, I don't think. Really don't think it wouldn't. So yeah, so that's Hate. Good little story. Next story from 1965 is called Sunjammer. Weirdly, the same year, Paul Anderson also produced a story called Sunjammer. I've not read that one, but I've got a copy of it, and I'm going to actually read it because I want to do a sort of slight comparison between them. And this is about solar sails and solar sailing. And I always, if you don't know the principle of solar sails, it's all to do with heat. If you see them in development in sort of paintings and stuff, the big sails from the sun, and it's to do with the heat radiation being used to propel a spacecraft. And it is a valid theory, and people have experimented with them. But it's almost like brings back the idea of sort of sailing boats. But anyway, the idea of this story is the guy, let me just check his name, John Merton. He develops the full ideas of solar sails and solar sailing, and they end up having this in all these races, which is races to the moon. And so this is the sort of his final one after a few years. And so it is the story of his race and the pressures of his race, and he's racing by himself. Other people got partners with them. And to me, it's a nice sort of story of almost longing and exploration, and that the science will win out, which obviously is a bit about sort of Clarke's interest in science and how scientifically literate he was. But also the characterization of is really done quite well in this as well. So behind Death and the Senator, this is probably my second favourite story. So that's Sunjammer from 1965. The synopsis of this sounds quite simple. This is from 1972. It's called A Meeting with the Medusa. With Medusa, not the Medusa. It is quite a well-known story of his. It's more a novella. It's quite a long one. And we follow... So I've got to look down again. Howard Falcon. What a name. Howard Falcon. It sounds like a big superhero name. And he is the pilot of a prototype helium balloon that crashes on the Earth, and he's in an injury. It takes him a couple of years to recover. And then what happens is there's explorations to Jupiter, and he is piloting and captaining another experimental sort of balloon airship to explore Jupiter. And that is basically the synopsis of it. The rest of it, I'd have to give away too much, I think, to it. It's beautifully written, actually. This one's really beautiful. Descriptions of Jupiter are really nice, and the way the technology works are really nice, and even the characterization is very good. I understand why it's a very well-known story, and it's well worth digging out. It's been in a few places, and I see it's quoted all over the place. So that is A Meeting with Medusa, and that's all I'm going to tell you, because I don't like giving out sort of spoilery things if I can avoid it, especially some of these little short stories, and it's sometimes very, very difficult. So yeah, so that collection of Arthur C. Clarke's, has that made me love him? No, but it has made me think that maybe I prefer his short stories over his longer form work. But anyway, that's probably I'm not going to do a Clarke now for a few weeks. Next month, I think my next one, give me 2 seconds. My next Arthur C. Clarke, as part of this sort of series of things I'm going to be reading, is The Ghost from the Grand Banks. And I'm planning on reading that in June. So if anybody else wants to read along with me, or do a buddy read with this, give us a shout. I'm almost picking not the well-known Arthur C. Clarke. I'm almost picking a bit obscure one. This one was published in 1990, I think. So, pardon me, it's quite a later one of his. I just quite like the idea of it. Find out when it was published. 1990, yes, 1990, 1992. Reprinted 93, this version. And it's basically about raising the Titanic, I think. I was just quite intrigued about it. So yeah, that will be the next one I'm reading. So if anyone's interested in reading this along with me, or just wants to read it, I will be doing that one. I said in June is my plan at the moment, because I've got stuff going on for the back end of this month, and I said I'm trying to do a Clarke thing a month at the moment. But do I love Clarke yet? No, but I'm enjoying him more than I have for a while, and that's basically what I think I will take away from these short stories. I'm probably going to see if I can get hold of the earlier collection of these, which would be quite interesting to read, I think. Anyway, I must go now, and I will speak to you very soon. Bye for now.